Hello everyone, welcome to the Comprehensive Guide to Support. Now Draco did specifically ask for Ratatoskir in the solo lane, but he also mentioned, or they also mentioned, pardon me, um, anybody out of role, and Guan Yu is a really nice, gentle introduction to characters out of role. Now, typically when you think support warrior, you're gonna think of Horus, but Guan Yu actually offers a lot as a support as well. Consider. His dash slows the enemy he dashes through. He has a heal, although frankly it is one of the worst heals in the game, but we're gonna talk about that later. He does have the heal. It still exists, even if it's trash. And he also has Tidal Assault, which reduces the protections of the person or the people he's hitting, and increasing his own protections. Finally, his ult has a stun on the end of it, which you can cancel early to bust out an even earlier stun if you're really into that. It really depends on the situation and the context. But he does have that option as well. So Guan Yu actually offers a very surprisingly diverse array of secondary effects on his abilities that do help in supporting. Unfortunately, the hard CC is attached to his ult, which does make him a little bit more difficult to support with, but if you go with what I like to call combat support, which is a really interesting concept, this goes a little bit better. Your early game is going to be, and even your mid game to an extent, is going to be very aggressive and very damaging. Who is our laning opponent? I'm wondering if Hell is going to be their support. That might work really well in my favor. Anyways, we're still going to be building mostly classically support. We're going to add in one or two very specific items that can really bring some interesting dynamics to support. And we're going to talk about those. Because unlike Guardians, who generally don't have great scaling, some warriors do actually have the ability to turn kills into actual damage, spin that increased experience into some damage here. Now, I don't care what you're playing, what role you're playing Guan Yu in, you always start with Tidal Assault. It's a requirement. I'm not going to hear any argument on this. Now, we're going to still start very standard. We're still going to go for Gauntlet of Thebes here. Now, against this team composition, I probably will build Ankh late game. I'm not going to want to start with that, because obviously, in the laning phase, we're against the duo lane, unless Hell is the support, and even then, I'm not too concerned about that. Based on this composition, I think I'm going to go with Horrific Emblem, because that's going to slow down Poseidon, as well as his attack speed, which is actually important, even if he's building for abilities. But that's going to slow down his attack speed, and that is also going to give us his slowed movement speed, and he doesn't have an escape, he just has a move buff. It's going to slow down Heimdall, who's just got the crystalline, and his attack speed as well. It's going to slow down Hell unless she cleanses herself. There's a lot of benefits here. Now, you might also be wondering, well, what about your itemization here, Professor? Why are you building multi-potions, and why are you building Hog? I mean, technically speaking, as a more damaging warrior, you shouldn't need Hog, right? Well, unfortunately, Tidal Assault has a 13 stinking second cooldown. So you want to use Tidal Assault here on the HP buff. And then, while your Tidal Assault is recharging, you're going to need to use Hog on the purple buff, because it's going to take Tidal Assault too long to come back for you to be using that on the purple buff. Whether or not you buy Hog has nothing to do with the amount of damage you're able to bring to bear on a camp. It has more to do with the cooldown of your first ability. And in this particular case, while I could use it here, the problem there is going to be, obviously, it wouldn't be up in time to clear the wave, which we don't want. So you have to Hog with Guan Yu specifically for that. It's a mirror match. Also, they have, for some unholy reason, a Nemesis support. Now, I have problems with that. We're going to go ahead and reduce that attack speed right off the top. That's going to give us a huge early push. You'll notice that they backed off immediately. I used a potion for absolutely no damn reason. That's not happening. He's going to push this. We really... Okay. We should have gone for the Harpy. We should have let them advance forward a little bit. The Harpy wasn't even up, so that's on me, actually. No, we're not doing that. He is insistent on clearing the wave. I did not need to take that damage, but it's going to be fine. That doesn't really make a huge difference. So you're, in the first 3 items, you're really not going to see any difference in how I build Guan Yu from your standard support, because you need those protections online first. I'm going to build Gauntlet of Thebes to get those stacks, and I'm going to grab Sovereignty. Now, there's a specific reason for this, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Actually, do I want Sovereignty, or do I want to go into a little bit of damage early on? I may. We might get this. Let me envision this for a second. No, we're gonna build a little spicier in, for Guan Yu. So you're gonna see a little bit of a different build after Gauntlet of Thebes. We're gonna have a conversation about it, don't worry about that. I'm not gonna just build things and not tell you why I'm building them. Right now, what we're really trying to keep an eye on here is Nemesis, because she is also a more damaging than average support, and we're going to need to keep an eye on that damage output there. I didn't really need to take that damage, but I'm going to be getting my heal pretty soon. She's going to be too hard on that. She's also almost out of mana. She's going for Sovereignty first, which isn't a bad idea, but she has made a mistake. If you notice, she's got Bluestone Pendant, and while that's going to give her some nice early game damage, and even some late game damage, first off, Nemesis does not have the greatest kit for ability-based damage. So there's that, first off. Second off, well, I think it's a little aggressive there for that one. But anyways, back to the point. So, the really favorable thing about Tidal Assault is that it reduces enemy protections by a flat amount. So early game, this is actually wicked powerful, and you can actually see where they're not doing well in health because I keep Tidal Assaulting them, and then they're, you know, taking extra mini damage because their protections are down. This is actually why I've been kind of focusing on Nemesis very specifically, because she already has protection items, so reducing her protections is going to matter a little bit more to her. So, back to the healing of Guan Yu. Why did I call it one of the worst heals in the game? Well, primarily because it really doesn't scale. It primarily exists as a minor sustain tool for the solo lane, but more importantly, it exists to make sure that you have your cooldowns. It's really a cooldown device more than anything else. In the solo lane, that doesn't matter because you have no allies to heal. It only works on allied gods, the cooldown reduction part. But in the support role, that's actually fantastic for making sure your abilities are online when your ADC needs them. You'd be surprised how relevant just a slow can be when it's up very quickly, when it's up so quickly. And you might be wondering, well, Professor, Tidal Assault still has 13-second cooldown. Yes, it does, but that only matters at level 1 when you don't have... well, I guess I can take this because he's got the... Theirs. But anyways, that only matters at level 1 because you don't have the ability to reduce those cooldowns. Relax. Alright. That kind of slapped, but sure. So she started building her protections there. But now I'm level 4. Just go on ahead and reduce those protections. Is he? He is. Okay. How did that not stun her? Wait a minute. I've got some questions involving with that. Excuse me? That really should have stunned her, but okay. Now that was a fairly interesting fight because we've forced him back into a more cautious position. We're going to go ahead and heal everyone, including the minions there. Dodge that. Good. We're going to need to go back soon because we actually have the opportunity to build... Don't you think about it, Nemesis. We have the opportunity to build Gauntlet of Thebes. We're going to want to take advantage of that. Nope, sorry, not today. You're overcommitting. You're overcommitting. Don't do it. Always increase Tidal Assault first. Don't do it. You crazy mad lad. Alright, I'm probably going to die from this, honestly. No, I still have survived. Oh, hello. Heal. She almost died from that ult. Yeah, we're gonna need to get out of here. It was interesting. Interesting. My Heimdall overstayed, but not by too much. I don't think it's gonna be a long-term problem. I'm not too concerned about it. he'll be able to get back pretty easily. So my next move is actually very specifically going to be Mystical Mail. Why, you might wonder. Professor, are you nuts? Well, first off, yes. But second off, and more importantly, I'm reducing enemy protections in general. Alright? That includes their magic protections. This means that, on average, my Mystical Mail is going to do more damage than it would for a lot of other supports. And I'll actually be able to have a legitimate damage presence in team fights. The reason why I'm building it so early, despite its cost and the relatively low defensive values of it, is because it is going to give me a really substantial boost to my early game damage, and that's going to be very valuable. She's just dead. There we go. Now, she died so quickly because I was reducing her protections for Tsukiyomi, which is, again, part of the reason why you play Guan Yu support. And she's still over there? I was kind of hoping I could get Nemesis to get dragged over here, but clearly no. We're going to have to do something about this. I have my ult, which is going to be absolutely huge. I don't know why I put that down there. I did not need to put that down there. You know, I don't need to be here either. Oh, he's going in on this. Excuse me? Alright, well, might as well do some damage, but these people are wild. Absolute mad lads. Actually, that ward is going to turn out to be fairly handy, because I am expecting a visit from the enemy jungler, in all honesty. Who I think is Poseidon? Yeah. Alright. Oh, I went right into that. I'm dead. There's no way I survived this. I knew he was going to ult, but I was hoping I could fake him out and dash through him before he did. I timed that totally wrong. It was honestly a pretty bold move to try. I shouldn't have tried it. That was very bold. I haven't got my stacks up yet. I probably shouldn't have tried it at that point. Well, I shouldn't have stayed so long at that point, considering I didn't have my stacks. That's on me. We'll be able to recover late game. I'm not too concerned about it. She did pull away one of those kills from Heimdall. I'm wondering if she's going to turn that around and use it. She's going to try, but I don't think... I think she's going to go the Corrupted Bluestone is what I think she's going to do. To give her increased attack speed, some ability damage, some protection increase. But she would have been far better off with, honestly, Animosity, which would have given her health. And she could have converted her boosted HP into some nice chin-size-like damage. And I think she could have really, really benefited from that most. So I think she just chose the wrong starter item there. I can understand where she's going with this, with the Bluestone, but I just don't think it's going to work out the way she thinks it's going to. Now, you'll notice I'm not increasing the heal. Well, it's nice to be able to heal. You're really using it at this point for cooldown reduction, primarily. There are some moments where you're going to be using it for the heal and try to save yourself, and that's fine. But you're primarily looking to use this to reduce your cooldowns, because that's just what you need it more for. Get your protections reduced. Get out of here. Hey, Nemesis. Oh, that's a catapult. That is an angry catapult. See right there, we tried to use that to help save Merlin. And I whiffed half of that, so that's cool. Get out of my face, Poseidon. Get these minions out of my way, too. I did not need to walk into that, honestly. Why is Heimdall over here, excuse me? That's interesting. I'll be really honest. I was not expecting that. He did play that correctly. That is a really great Heimdall rotation. That was good. That was a really... I'm honestly impressed. It was a crazy rotation, but it was very effective, and he actually played that perfectly. He is taking a risk, though, because now our Heimdall can do literally the exact same thing. And he's going to be able to turn that around. Yep. make that worth. It's gonna be interesting though, because our Heimdall is gonna lose the lane. But I think we're gonna turn this around and take out this here catapult. So it's really an interpretation of what you value more. Please fill out the poll at home. And then mail it in to P.O. Box WTF. Alright. We're just going to go ahead and grab some experience here. Nemesis is pulling ahead of me a little bit, and I don't particularly like it, but that's because she's actually going after kills pretty aggressively. So we're just going to farm pretty aggressively. We'll be able to turn things around and start getting some slappy kills. I knew hell was going to go over there. Why did... Ah, no, she's completely dead. Are we going to go for this, Merlin? You want to go for this? Are you nuts? Yeah, he's going for this. Alright. And Merlin does not full commit. I was going in there. Come on, you want to chase me in here? Didn't think so. Thanks for cleansing me. Not sure why she bothered with that, but alright. Okay. How'd that work out for you? You're still trying to damage me. Alright. And here's Tsukiyomi, I think. Yeah. Look, if I could just get some spicy healing from, like, the minion wave dying, that'd be great. Could I please? Could I get some heals? Just from minions dying? Assists, please? No? Alright. We're just gonna go back then. Wait, hold on. No, we're not gonna go back because, oh, we actually kind of, I keep forgetting they reduced the price of that. Excuse me. Yeah, he doesn't, they don't need me here. They really don't. It's just Nemesis. She's got a very odd build. She's been fooled by my heal. She thinks it matters. It doesn't. Let me look at this flat healing. 150 healing. Sure, 1.7 times the normal healing. That's not even double healing. That's not even 300 health. What's he apologizing for? He doesn't need to apologize. He's doing alright. He's doing good. What is this guy apologizing for? It's fine. It's fine. Poor soul. He's got no idea that he's done nothing wrong. He's trying. He's doing well. He's making the moves. I appreciate. Who's our jungler? It's stupid Poseidon. I keep forgetting this. Poseidon's an interesting jungler. He can work really well in the role. It's just that you have to be kind of particular about it. There are specific items you need to build. He is building them, actually, so that's good to see. Poseidon is also fairly interesting in that even in the jungle role, he can either build auto attacks or abilities. It's totally up to you. I love Poseidon for just that reason. I probably should not have gone the long way around, to be honest. And I'll just accidentally steal that, so that's fine. Little did you know, I was expecting the whirlpool. You are just literally going to let me do whatever I want to you. I mean, I died, but I took out the Poseidon at the very least. Hell died. Nemesis. See, okay, was that worth it? Yes-ish. In general, that's going to be in my favor, because that's going to give my jungler the chance to catch up, because my jungler was slightly behind. Not by too much, but by enough where that is going to make a difference. We're going to grab Kurstonk. So that is good in that aspect. That is very important for that reason. We're also going to buy Pestilence at this point. So that was worth it from that perspective. Also, since Hell died, that also freed up Merlin to go and cover anything that needed to be covered anyways. Whether it's a lane that needed help, what have you. Doesn't make a difference. So there is that. We also had the benefit of King Arthur having died, so Changa wasn't really going to need that much in the way of help either. So, finally, there's that benefit as well. At the end of the day, while Nemesis could have caused trouble, I really doubt she would have been able to do too much, because she seemed... I don't know where she was, but that also meant that she didn't know where she was either. That doesn't sound like it makes sense, but if you can't see an enemy, then either they're on their way to a very specific thing, or, as the fact that she didn't show up anywhere significant proves, she wasn't going anywhere in particular. She was trying to figure out where to go, and just couldn't figure it out. Are you actually backing? No. I was going to say, you have almost full health and mana. You really don't need to back. I'm just going to dive it. Whatever. No, I'm just going to stand here and let him take that tower. You're going to ult me? I didn't think so. Now, why am I over here helping Heimdall? Mostly for pressure reasons. Mid lane obviously is not having any kind of particular... You absolutely nut job. Oh, no. Oh, no. Ah, shoot. Alright, so the problem there was that we overstayed. The first tower was fine, but we kept pressing. And that was the problem. We should have retreated, absolutely. I was confident we could stay over there because I saw Changa and I believe Merlin in mid lane. They were, I think, like 2/3 the way up or something like that. And I was like, alright, so that means that no one's coming. And that was probably true at that moment, but the instant they backed up, which I hadn't noticed because I was busy fighting, the instant they backed up, we probably should have left. We weren't paying enough attention to the minimap, basically, Heimdall and I. That's not necessarily Heimdall's responsibility. He's the ADC. I'm the support. That was more my responsibility than his. Again, supports are one of the two primary shot callers in the game, so that really should have been something I should have been keeping a little bit more of an eye on. So that is mostly on me. A little bit on Heimdall, but mostly me. So I really should have been paying a little bit more attention to the positioning of my allies, because once they backed off, I really should have told Heimdall, hey, we need to get the heck out of Dodge, for the same reason, because we were at that point going to be very vulnerable to a potential gank scenario, and that's exactly what happened. At this particular point, I'm not worried about Heimdall, because he's on his side. He's still got his tower, so he's got somewhere relatively safe he can back up to. I'm assuming we're going to go for the, yeah. So I'm not worried about Heimdall right now. If he starts pushing way up, then I'm going to have to start thinking about that. And it does look like he's starting to push up a little bit here. We've got two enemies here. Didn't even know he was there. He timed that wrong. I don't know how I got that kill, but alright. We're going to go ahead and reduce everyone's healing right here. I'm going to try my best to reduce some protections here. Okay, the Nemesis chose the correct target for the ult. She ulted me, which is the correct move, because that steals away protections. That's going to make her beefier, and that's what she really wants to see. Hopefully our Heimdall can take out their Heimdall. Oh, that's a death. That's death. He might have a hard time here. If he can take out King Arthur... no, he's not going to make it out of here. He might be able to take King Arthur with him, but he's not going to make it. Nah. Once Hell showed up, that was it. At this particular point, we are going to be grabbing Glad Shield for, again, a little bit more spicy, cheeky damage. Now, the interesting thing about Glad Shield is because Tower Assault is increasing our protections, it is going to mildly increase the damage output of Glad Shield. Not by a ton, I'll freely admit that I don't have any problem admitting that, but by enough to make a difference here. Now, my last item is quite the interesting subject of conversation, because I have a couple of interesting options. My first option is I can build the infamous Shield of Regrowth, so I can get increased movement speed. Now, whether or not that is necessary is going to depend on who the laning opponent is. In this particular instance, this is going to be my move, because I will need to keep up with Nemesis. She is an assassin, so even though she's building tank, she still is, by default, moving a little bit faster than I am. So I'm going to need a little bit of a movement boost that Shield of Regrowth is going to offer me to be able to keep up with her in rotations if I really need to, or just to get to emergency situations as fast as I need to. Alright. Under more normal circumstances, should I, say, match the speed of the enemy support, then I would be more likely to go with something like Mantle of Discord, or if I was really paranoid about the healing, I could go Brawler's Beatstick for just a splash of hard damage, but really more looking for that anti-heal, just as options. So, it's just a couple of things to keep in mind there. She does not need me here. Why am I stealing her experience? I need to get out of here. She doesn't need me here at all. Unless King Arthur comes back. Alright. And this is where I would really like to have Shield of Regrowth. We're going to weaken this a little bit here while we're passing by, because I'm not really going to lose that much speed doing so. I have my ults. There's Tsukiyomi. And who is this dying? Merlin and Heimdall. No, you've made a mistake. You should not have cleansed yourself that quickly. Alright, my goal right now is to keep Changa alive. This is going to be fairly interesting. Alright, you can hold me, that's fine. Okay, good counterplay, good counterplay. Good. Take her out, take her out. Nope, alright, that's fine, that's fine. Can we get to Changa and save her? Yes, he did actually, but same difference. Bifrost. The Bifrost is not going to save you. It's just not. At that point, it was far too late for the Bifrost to do anything for you guy. Alright, so that worked out. Now, why was I focusing on Nemesis there rather than, say, King Arthur? There are two reasons for this. First off, unfortunately, without my ult, I can't stop King Arthur from doing anything. Okay? I have no way of interrupting any of his moves. I don't have any hard CC. I can reduce his protections, and I was absolutely trying to do that, but I was more concerned about Nemesis using her reflection shield to really counteract the healing from Nemesis from Changa. That was what my concern was, because that would basically nullify the healing that she'd be getting typically in that situation, so it would be like a net loss. And then on top of that, King Arthur used his own Ankh, which absolutely killed him. The reason why I used my Ankh there is not only was I assuming incorrectly that King Arthur had Soul Eater, but I knew Nemesis was going to be trying to heal herself using the Reflection Shield, because it does actually heal her to some extent. And I really didn't want her to be doing that, so I used the Ankh to try to make sure that she would die, so Changa wouldn't accidentally kill herself on Nemesis. That was what my goal was there. That was my primary concern. I forgot I have Mystical Mail and can't hide behind rocks. The little wave pulse from Mystical Mail is visible from behind the rock if you're paying attention. Now I'm going to engage on Hell here because... Oh, I didn't know the whole world was over here. But I knew that Tsukiyomi could get over here, and I really wanted to take out the healer while we had them in the area, because this means I can save my Ankh for the next fight. Alright, so much for that plan. Ouch. Ouch. Hello? I'm gonna die, but I will die for my team. Hold on. Did you just goof everything? Hello? Reduce her protections. Excellent. Excellent. Heal. Ah, that was nice. That was nice. He barely saved that. Alright. Fantastic. We can totally attack the Fire Giant. I will probably die for this, but that's completely okay. Let's see if I can survive this. I made it. Alright, nice. Okay, so we're gonna... yes. I was gonna clear that left lane. I want Changa to do that, ideally, because she does kind of need the experience. No, before I build that, I want Sentinel's Embrace. Now, why wouldn't I want Sentinel's... What is that other one? Sentinel's Gift or whatever? Sentinel's Boon. That's the one. First off, I don't need the healing. Even though my healing ability is really inferior, it's still decent. And I'm going to have HP 5 from Shield of Regrowth. It's more important for me at this point to provide boosted protections for my allies. And also, as I've mentioned earlier, we can turn those boosted protections into more damage for Glad Shield. So even if I'm alone, I'm still able to present a legitimate threat, as my little scuffle with Hell proved earlier on. Alright. Now, another thing is, and this is actually, I think, the most useful aspect of Guan Yu as a support, you'll notice that I haven't really built a ton of cooldown reduction, whereas normally you would want to as a support. And this has, in large part, to do with the decreased cooldowns that he gets from using his abilities and hitting his abilities. Two of his three abilities that he typically has available to him, I don't know why I goofed that, reduce his cooldowns. Little do they know, I'm Guanstoppable. Now, what the hell was I doing there? Like, what was that insanity? Distraction. Pure distraction. I wanted them to be paying attention to me, so that way my allies could relatively easily, I'm kind of concerned now though, could relatively easily take the tower. Now, how did I know I'd survive? The short answer is Heimdall wasn't there. That's what it basically comes down to. The Hunter is primarily the one responsible for dealing the damage to the tank in a situation. So, as long as the Hunter isn't there, you stand a really strong chance of surviving. There are exceptions to this. If the enemy mage is building particularly anti-tank, then the mage can obviously still pose a problem. It does not seem to me, and I'm going to check this when I die, because I'm definitely dead, yeah. What we're going to be checking is how the mages have been building. Now, Poseidon, I'm not really surprised, hasn't been building too much. He does have Soul Reaver, but he hasn't got any penetration, so I'm not too concerned about that. He's also got E-Staff. But these are both timed things. These only, well, this isn't anymore. But this only happens every 15 seconds on one target. Hell doesn't have any pen. She's also got Soul Reaver, but she is, for some unholy reason, building Breastplate of Valor, which I find kind of funny, because that means I am apparently a legitimate enough threat combined with Heimdall and Tsukiyomi. She probably wouldn't have built that if it had been, if I had been a Guardian, and we'd had, well, then again, we have a Magic Solo, so I guess that really doesn't make a difference in the long run, but it's still kind of interesting that she built that. I'm going to talk about, that's not necessarily a bad pick, I'm going to be really honest, but we do need to have a conversation about this in regards to what Hell is trying to do with it, what that actually means, and the significance of all that in general, but we'll talk about that at the end of the match. I'm not too concerned about it now. I don't want to distract you from the Guanstoppable gameplay. So, okay, there's Hell in mid. We're just going to go ahead and split with him. I'm assuming you're ahead, right? At this point, you don't have, okay, no, you really don't need me to steal your gold because you actually don't have a full build yet. He still has his starter item unevolved. So we'll just take the oracles while we wait to see where the enemy is actually popping up. Alright. Now, at this point, I'm trying to figure out why my allies are all split up. There's no sense to this. Okay, so we have Merlin fighting Nemesis for no reason. And what I mean by no reason is there's nothing, we're not going to gain anything from that. We need to, alright, here's the enemy team. I thought for sure she was just going to walk right into that for no reason. I really did. I forgot to buy wards, that reminds me. Yeah, this is taken. Where is Heimdall? Heimdall is there, that's fine. We can just take right tower. Fire Giant. Now, why didn't I hard commit to that? Mostly because there's nothing really huge to fight over. I just wanted to scare them off for the sake of the Fire Giant because there was indications by Heimdall that he wanted to go for the Fire Giant, which makes some sense. I don't think we should really be seriously doing this. I think we should be setting up an ambush. Alright, they're going for the Pyromancer, which is fine. Hello. If we can just pick off Hell. I don't think we're going to at this point in time. Alright. No, don't tank this. I got this. Look, 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 look. Alright. You didn't need to tank that. It wasn't too bad. considering its health, but... Oh, it makes my support heart scream. Alright, so Poseidon's right there. So they're really not expecting us to do the Fire Giant. I'm going to contribute a little bit here. No, I'm not going to scare off hell. No, you're going to need to die. She did that too early. She timed... Oh, she used beads. Fair enough. Nope. There we go. How you doing? Nope. She backed up real quick. Alright. I would like to wait for my ult to return before making a big move. Seal some people up. Our people... My team is a little bit better at poking, I think. Like, unless they walk right into a whirlpool, which is a totally different story. But, okay. That's, you know... to each their own, I guess. Now, why am I so confident that we are going to outpoke them? I have Sentinel's Embrace. I'm boosting the protections of my allies. Nemesis is not, okay? This is probably the best example of why this matters, why this item can really make a difference. It is in scenarios exactly like this. She has picked a item that benefits only herself. Yes, it does increase her protections, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it also does absolutely nothing for her team. Even the War Flag would have been a better starter item that still could have provided her with some form of damage output. I have just simply converted my boosted protections into damage output. Alright, that is all I have done here. I really needed him to die, because if he did not die, I was going to be in for a very hard time. Alright, so we've taken... That was a bold move, guy. Just trying to keep them off. There we go. And what is their next move at this point? We're going to commit to you. Kill her, please. Thank you. Oh, wow. No. Can we win this here? I'm not supremely confident. I will die for the cause. I will die for the cause. Try me, bitch. That's what I thought. Anyways. I got kind of heated there. So, as you can see, Guan Yu makes for a very unusual supports. He's one of those very rare supports where I'm okay building hyper damage items on the regular. Now again, I would like to emphasize that I very specifically built Shield of Regrowth to kind of counteract the increased movement speed that I was facing against Nemesis. And again, I went into Mystical Mail for some nice early game damage. Now it's very, very important that you remember that I built my splashes of damage after a really serious support item, Gauntlet of Thebes. Now, Gauntlet of Thebes isn't necessarily always going to be the correct choice, alright? If they have, say, for instance, a 4 damage comp, right? What am I talking about? A 4 physical comp, right? They have 4 physicals on their team and only 1 source of magic damage, then you're going to want Sovereignty here instead, because that's going to be more useful in general than Gauntlet of Thebes will, right? Same thing if they have 4 magics. You're going to want Heart Ward Amulet. Things like that, right? But generally speaking, Gauntlet of Thebes is consistently a very, very strong support item, and you really can't go wrong with it. Once you have this, though, you can then start working on things like Mystical Mail. Now, you'll actually notice that during this period of time where I was stacking Gauntlet of Thebes and working on Mystical Mail, that was probably the roughest point of the game for me there, and there's a reason for that. I went into Mystical Mail, I wasn't going as defensively as probably I should or could have. That really depends on the composition in question here. And I will be really upfront with you. I took a big risk going into Mystical Mail. Nemesis clearly showed and demonstrated a strong interest in mixing some damage into her build as well, despite being a support. There differences between Nemesis and Guan Yu that makes this more difficult for Nemesis that I'll get into in a bit, but she was clearly interested from Bluestone to Toxic Blade. She was definitely showing interest in bringing some damage to the field, alright? So I did take a risk. I actually only got away with this because I was ahead. Alright? That is very specifically why I was able to get away with this. This is why I decided to ultimately go for this, because you'll remember I was trying to decide whether or not I should mix up the build and go for a little bit of damage in the late game, or if I should just go on ahead and start splashing it in now. Honestly, it was because I was ahead at that point, not by much, but by enough. And there were two reasons why I knew I was going to stay ahead. One was Nemesis' starter item. I'll address that more specifically in a bit. But the second was, honestly, the fact that at that point, Tsukiyomi was already starting to do really well. Merlin was already showing signs that he was doing well at that point. The odds were very good at that particular point. Even right after I died, the odds were still very strong that we were going to pull ahead as a team. And I could safely afford to build Mystical Male. And I turned out to be correct. But I want you to understand very, very specifically, this was a risk. This very specific item. Glad Shield, not so much. I'll talk about that in a second as to why. But Mystical Male was a risk. It was an educated risk. I knew what I was doing. I've played Guan Yu to Diamond clearly, and I've played Guan Yu in the support role a lot. I really know support Guan Yu well. If you're newer to Guan Yu in the support role, or just new to Guan Yu in general, or even just new to supporting, you might not want to have taken this chance in the same situation. You have to really judge the situation individually on whether or not you can get away with Mystical Male or Glad Shield this early. Alright, I read the situation, and I realized odds are good. Keep in mind, odds are good. There was still the chance this could have been a poor choice. But the odds were in my favor, no reference intended, that I could get away with building Mystical Male, get some physical protection, get some health, get a really nice damaging aura that I could make work even more effectively through Taolu Assault. Okay? This is something if and when you play support Guan Yu, this is something you'll have to assess each individual match on whether or not you can pull this off. And sometimes you're going to be wrong, sometimes you're going to be right. That's fine. I learned as much as I did in this game by making mistakes and learning from them. If you get this wrong, just make a mental note, remember it next time. Alright? But this was a risk. Pestilence was obvious. They have Hell, they have Nemesis. The Heimdall was clearly building at least some form of self-heal because he had Death's Toll. He wound up going for Death's Embrace because he was behind, which is the smart choice here. I needed Pestilence. Out of all the support items, I think this one needs the least justification against this team composition. Then I built Glad Shield. Now, Glad Shield isn't as risky to build with support Guan Yu as Mystical Male because this is providing you several interesting benefits. First off, it's providing you with 40 physical protection versus only the 35 from Mystical Male. It's giving you 50 more health, and you're probably thinking to yourself, ooh, big deal. 10% cooldown reduction means a decent amount to supports, and while Guan Yu doesn't need cooldown as much as other supports, having it also doesn't hurt. So Glad Shield offers you a lot of really nice benefits that makes this a substantially less risky investment in your support build as Guan Yu than Mystical Male. And this is always consistently something you're going to want, because even if you're not looking to build any amount of damage, even if you're not building Mystical Male, just a Glad Shield alone, some nice physical protections, some nice health, bit of cooldown, and a passive that will ensure that you at least have a mild damage contribution to team fights, even as a support, which is a really nice thing to have and can give you the edge, especially if the enemy is playing a more aggressive support, like Nemesis in this case. So, and then Shield Regrowth, I've already discussed this pretty thoroughly. Yeah, the physical power is nice and all, but you're really building this for the move speed and the cooldown. Now, also, I want to point out that even though I didn't go really heavy on the protections, I was still walking around with 241, 222 base protections. This doesn't include the auras from Thebes or the aura from the Sentinel's Embrace, I was walking around with some pretty good protections, and a large part of that has to do with Gauntlet of Thebes. It's very important you have either Thebes or one of the other aura protection items just, tailored to whatever the specific enemy composition is, but it is very important, and it does really help. Now, what specifically was going on here with literally everything? What specifically was the situation here, right? Why was I so confident in building Mystical Mail? Well, let's talk about the first indication that and this is a really early cue for me, but I didn't mention it at the time because I wanted to see how my teammates were doing first before committing to it. But my first clue was actually the Bluestone pendant, which is why I mentioned it. I understand probably she was going to go for the Corrupted Bluestone to give herself some increased attack speed, some protections, and some bonus ability damage. She's playing Nemesis support. She was looking to deal at least some damage. I don't necessarily have a problem with this, and the thought process was good. That's fine. The issue is, this is more of something you would want to build as a solo lane Nemesis, a role in which she's very strong, by the way. She's much less strong in the support role because, unlike Guan Yu, whose every ability has a support-like secondary effect, even Taolu Assault, Nemesis does not have this. Okay? She has a slow, which is fine. She has a health shield, which is okay, but it's a very short-lived health shield a lot of the time because it dies the instant she gets hit with crowd control if they haven't updated that. Her dash means nothing in a fight scenario. Dashing through enemies does nothing. My dash slows enemies. She dashes twice for just damage. Okay? As a comparison, you can, just by describing it that way, you can see from a supportive standpoint why Nemesis right there alone isn't as good, isn't as effective in the support role. She's got the protections, sure, but she hasn't got the secondary effects. While Guan Yu suffers from a severe lack of hard crowd control, Nemesis not only suffers from the same complete lack of hard crowd control. Unlike Guan Yu, she doesn't even have hard CC on her ult, but she's only really got two forms of CC. Her ult slows, and she's got the double blades that slow. And as nice as it is to pull away protections from the enemy support and give them to yourself as a support, the really interesting thing with that particular move is you're absorbing a percentage of their protections. I believe it's 35% if memory serves. If you're already a support building protections, you really don't you don't need 35% of the enemy support's protections. I'm being really honest here. It's a bit overkill. And it does not really work in a support Nemesis's favor. Alright, so from a kit standpoint, she's got issues as a support. And then she builds Bluestone. Now, I mentioned earlier that Warflagger Animosity would have been much better off for her. Specifically, I think Warflag would have been a really dominating support item that she could have built. Poseidon could have used that to increase his attack speed, which would have given him more Tide, which would have given him more damage output, as long as, of course, he wasn't being played by a TikToker and eating the Tide. I mean, don't eat Tide Pods. Then you have Heimdall, also obviously building auto attacks. He's a stinking hunter. And then we have, of course, Nemesis, who, if she was building the Warflag, she could have turned that attack speed at the very end of the game into a really interesting chin size, build full protections, at the very end of the game build chin size for some surprising burst of damage out of a support, and really go gung-ho with that. And I've done that before, not necessarily specifically with Nemesis, I've done that with other characters. And you could have done that and had a really interesting damage impact as a support Nemesis, but she went with the Bluestone despite the fact that her abilities really don't hit hard enough to really justify that. Yeah, Bluestone's nice in the early game, even as a support, but that falls off very quickly from a support standpoint. Now, the Sovereignty was fine. I think she should have been building Gauntlet of Thebes in this particular scenario. We had 3 physicals, which makes Sovereignty a good choice, but it would have been better as a third pick after Thebes, especially considering the fact that as an assassin, she has lower baseline protections than warriors or guardians. So she needed to bolster her baseline protections. Now, I can understand from that standpoint why you wouldn't necessarily want to start with Gauntlet of Thebes. Right? I mean, she built Bluestone. Didn't get any kind of defensive stats from that. HP 5 and MP 5 are sustain stats, not defense stats. And I can understand that she wanted to just rush into something that was going to give her protections right now, rather than protections 10 minutes from now. I can understand that logic. And from that standpoint, as well as the standpoint of our team composition, this was a strong pick. But again, this comes back to the fact that Bluestone Pendant was not the move to make as a support Nemesis. It just is reinforcing the problems with Bluestone as a starter on a support Nemesis. War Flag, I still say, would have been her best option. Again, Animosity would have been an acceptable substitute. But Bluestone was not the way. Now, Toxic Blade, I can understand why she built this, and this is a good pick, but I think this was a bit too early, considering she did have Bluestone. She, at this point, only has one serious protection item, and while Toxic Blade offers a little bit of health, this is mostly an attack item. It's got pen, it's got attack speed, it's got move speed. This would have been better as a 4th or 5th item when healing was more significant, especially since, again, as Guan Yu, my heal kind of sucks. It really does. Okay, let's not beat around the bush. I'm not even healing 300 HP per heal. It's really bad. So, Toxic Blade wasn't really going to be necessary from that standpoint. Now, Changa, normally I would say, yeah, it justifies Toxic Blade. Absolutely. But Changa was support Changa. And since her heal partially scales, she wasn't going to be healing as much as you would normally expect because she was building hybrid. Okay, this is actually why Changa had a problem in that lane, but I'll talk about that in a second, because it is an interesting point that I want to bring up. So, under normal circumstances, I would agree with this, but considering how weak the heals were on our team, I really don't think that this was going to be necessary as a 3rd item, possibly as a 6th. Maybe a 5th if you're feeling really nervous. But even then, I doubt that this combined with the Ankh from King Arthur was strictly necessary as forms of anti-heal. She would have actually been better off building here, in all honesty. You didn't need this heavy of anti-heal for what we had on offer as healing. I think the scariest thing we had in terms of healing was Heimdall's self-heal. I'm going to be really honest. Well, no, this doesn't heal. Yeah, that was the biggest amount of healing we had. Even Merlin's Bancroft's talent, that wasn't healing him that much at that point in the game. So, yeah, I think the Toxic Blade was a little overkill. And she did build Pestilence right afterwards, which is fine. I just think Toxic Blade was a little bit overboard, especially when you consider that she already was planning on building Pestilence probably at this point. Stone-Cutting Sword was a weird pick. And I kind of understand the logic here. Again, we're going back to the idea of her trying to do a combination of being tanky and dealing damage. The problem is that being a support isn't just about being tanky. That's only half the equation. Okay? This is my actual problem with Nemesis. She can tank just fine, she just doesn't have the backup ability, the secondary effects to justify the decision. And Stone-Cutting Sword, you have to understand that Stone-Cutting Sword is really effective on enemies who can't get away from you. Alright? We only had one person on the team who couldn't get away from Nemesis. That was Heimdall. And that was it. Changa can dance away, or stun you. While Heimdall can use his ult, he's more likely to use it as an escape at that point. Tsukiyomi can stun you, he can slow you down, and he can just ult his way to some other enemy entirely. And Merlin, of course, has his little blink and I have my dash. There were probably times she was able to get this to work really well for her, and that was probably during the times her ult was active, like she'd used it on somebody and they were slowed. That would be a really devastating combination with Stone-Cutting Sword, and probably what she was thinking of when she built this. But again, it just comes down to the fact that as a support, it's really not going to make that much of a difference. And while it is increasing your protections by 15, which isn't a hell of a lot of protections to be completely honest, it's not enough considering how little protections you already had at this point. Alright? Just, I can understand why this was built, but considering the rest of her build, she could not afford to not have more protections at this point. This should have been Mantle of Discord. It should have been any one of the mantles, to be completely honest. That would have worked. Or Pridwin would have been a really nice pickup as well, instead of Stonecutting. The Glad Shield, great item on Nemesis. You wouldn't think so, considering that, again, only like 2 of her abilities actually care about, damage in the way that Gladiator Shield cares about. But, yeah, you use your ult on a target, and then you start blasting them with the dash as an aggressive option, and the Twin Blades, that actually can do some pretty serious damage at that point. Again, stealing like a third of the enemy support's protections can be really substantial. Again, this goes back to being better, though, for a solo lane Nemesis than a support Nemesis. More than anything else. So, now, I am going to point out a really interesting problem here. And this is something I don't think is necessarily talked about enough. It's a really specific subject. Notice the Nemesis's player name. It's Dirk33TTV. Now, obviously, TTV means Twitch. Now, I'm not complaining about Twitch players playing Smite. I think it's great. More power to you. I'm making a damn YouTube video. I'm not here to criticize Twitch streamers, okay? I have no beef with Twitch streamers. The issue here is there is a really high probability that this was somehow involved with the audience. Now, I chose Guan Yu as an out-of-role warrior in the support role, but I knew going into it, first off, that I had a lot of experience with an out-of-role Guan Yu. I have a lot of experience with Guan Yu in general. Point 1. Point 2. I know how to make Guan Yu work in a support role. This has hopefully become very obvious throughout this video, with the abilities that I used in my contributions as a support to my allies, even as I was able to pick up kills at the same time. 3. I have stated numerous times throughout these episodes that while you can technically play any character in any role, there are some characters who just are so bad at a role compared to others that why would you choose to cripple yourself in this way? Basically shoot yourself in the foot when there are better options available. And I've made reference to this several times, and even some specific comparisons. I don't have a problem with being a damage support either. I just played a hybrid Guan Yu basically in the support role. That's what it basically amounts to. Nor is Nemesis necessarily bad in well, okay, Nemesis is very risky to play in the role. She tends to not do well in the role because she hasn't got the backup for it. She hasn't got the effects, the ability effects, the secondary effects. They just aren't there for support. She makes for a very strong solo laner, though. Out-of-role solo laner. Fantastic. This build is just silly. I almost want to say that this was a for fun build, and maybe it was viewer requested. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what the story is behind this, but I do find that this really wild build being built by a streamer is indicative of a very interesting problem where content creators, not just Twitch streamers, I've seen YouTubers do this too, where they're picking really crazy things, really crazy characters in these wild roles, and they are basically cherry-picking the games. They're playing a bunch of games a day, recording the good ones and not showing you the bad ones a lot of the time. Now, you've seen me lose in these series. I don't have a problem with losing. The only time I don't show you an episode is if something happens to interrupt the match. I crash, the enemy one of the enemies leaves the game, and it's no longer a competitive game at that point because one side or the other has too much of an advantage. A team surrenders so early that I don't get to show you the late game, things like that. Those are the episodes you don't see. You also don't see my daily warm-up match, because that's obviously purely to get me in the Smite frame of mind, get me into the zone and everything. You don't see that match either. It's the one match that I usually complete that you don't see, is my warm-up match. you have a responsibility when creating content for this game to not lead your viewers to do wild things. And this was probably entertaining from a streaming standpoint. His or her viewers probably had a blast watching them get curb stomped as this crazy Nemesis support, but the rest of their team suffered as a result of this. And unless they're in a 5-man, in which case this is completely fine, you're basically dooming the rest of your team to a really rough game for no reason. And not everyone has the time for this. I work a full-time job, but I'm sure some of these other people in this match do too. And not everyone has the time or patience for this. And it's something you really should think about before you go for a wild and crazy build. There are people you can play out of role really effectively in the role. And I want to actually take a moment to talk about some assassins that play support really well. Nemesis is not one of them. But I want to take a moment to talk about these very specific assassins. Just so that way you know, and in the future you'll know what to expect when I bring an assassin into the role. Because eventually I do want to talk about that, and I do want to do episodes, but I'm going to be very careful with those choices, and I'm going to explain to you why they work very specifically. And a lot of content creators for Smite are doing this for just pure entertainment value and leading people down the garden path. And I know it's for entertainment, and that's fine. Again, if it's a 5-man, I'm totally fine with this because everyone going into the match knows it's wild. There's one Smite creator I watch. He 5-mans very regularly. For the life of me, I can't remember his name off the top of my hat. He's got the Habwa channel symbol. I'll put it in the description when I remember his channel name. I'll probably watch some of his stuff tonight, actually. But I watch him. He 5-mans, and he goes with these wild builds, and that's fine. He's 5-manning. Everyone in his party is doing wild and crazy stuff, and it's wildly entertaining. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're queuing alone, or you're queuing with only 1 or 2 friends, now you're dragging 1, 2, 3, 4 people into a match where they're unknowingly doomed because you're trying to create funny content, haha. Alright? There's a difference. And even if you don't think about it, there is a responsibility to some extent to at least put in a strong effort. And this just doesn't feel like, based on the build, it just doesn't feel like that to me. I understand where a lot of this build is coming from. Toxic Blade was a mistake. I can understand why Glad Shield and Stone-Cutting Sword were built. And I can understand the intention behind Bluestone, but in total, in a support role, it just doesn't work. This is a solo build taken into the support lane. Okay? I just kind of wanted to rant about this because I've not actually addressed this before, and I think it is something that isn't talked about often enough in the community. And I think people should be much more careful with that, because I am starting to get requests from viewers on some out of role characters in different roles. For example, Draco specifically requested Rat in the solo lane, and I just didn't happen to be able to get that match, a recordable match as Ratatoskir in the solo lane, unfortunately. I've got Guan Yu in the support role, which is about what I had available to me. I will eventually do that Rat in the solo lane when I get the chance. It just depends on what roles I get in a night. But at the end of the day, I have consistently been informing you, hey, this person's good in this role for these reasons, even if they're out of role. I'm not going to go and pick someone terrible in a role just for haha funnies. I will strongly recommend against this. I will do for each role one character that's bad in the role so you can see why it's bad. I'm still going to be trying my damnedest, and I will be attaching an apology to that video to anyone who is in that match, but I think it is important for me to do one match in each role of someone bad in the role, out of role, just one person, and why they're bad there. Okay, because I think a lot of people don't really realize how bad it can be until they see it, and I think that needs to be done. That's in the future, though. And I'm going to be trying my damnedest so that you can see that even with me trying my hardest, the character is so bad in the role that it just drags the whole match down. Alright, well, at least the team. But let's talk assassins. Alright, now if you're going to take an assassin into the support role, let's have a really serious conversation about this. We've already talked about why Nemesis really doesn't work in the role, and actually very few assassins can pull this off. Very few. In fact, I'm going to tell you the only assassin I am comfortable bringing into the role in any given moment. Ravon. Ravon is the only assassin with the crowd control, the defensive abilities, everything to carry off the role. Let's look at his kit really quick. Let me show you what I'm talking about. First off, he's got one of the most defensive passives amongst assassins. Every 8 hits from anything that he busts out, he receives a shield equal to 7% of his max health. This stacks 3 times. You are getting a health shield equal to 21% of your maximum health. Already, building tank items rewards you. You have a really quick 9-second cooldown. Slow. Ignore the scaling. Doesn't matter. We're talking about supporting. This is a 9-second cooldown slow. We've already talked about how effective quick cooldown slows can be, and this is 9 seconds before crowd control reduction. What the heck am I talking about? Cooldown reduction. Alright, we have overhead kick. Now you might think that this is silly for a support to have, but being CC immune for a brief duration, if you can see crowd control coming, as a support, not getting crowd controlled gives you a lot more utility in a fight, because that means you're not standing around being stunned, rooted, silenced, whatever. Kick flip through that and keep on supporting. Keep body blocking. Keep slowing. Keep rooting the enemy with 10-hand Shadow Fist. Use Mystic Rush for some up to 30% damage mitigation. Okay? Ravon has even more from a support standpoint than Guan Yu does. And you just saw how effective Guan Yu is in the role, potentially. Ravon is better because he actually offers consistent hard crowd control with the root in 10-hand Shadow Fist. He gets damage mitigation on Mystic Rush. He has a quick slow. He uses it quickly. It has a low cooldown. It is fast as hell. He's got CC immunity for a brief moment, which is incredibly useful as a support. I can't even explain to you in words how important this is without either showing you, which hopefully I will be able to in the future, or without you really experiencing it for yourself. Support mains know exactly what I'm talking about. And then finally, Chain of Blows, a passive that gives him a health shield. This is the single best assassin to take in the support role. And again, he's the only one I'm really comfortable taking into the support role, because a lot of these other assassins just don't have the crowd control presence. And that's primarily what it comes down to, because Nemesis can get tanky, Bakasur can get tanky, alright? Both of these two can get fairly tanky, alright? I've seen Naja's taken into the support role. I don't like this, for one extremely specific reason. Now, a lot of people justify this by saying, well, Ring Toss gives a protections debuff, it slows the enemy. Wow, he's got a self-heal. Amazing. He's got a stun armillary sash. Woohoo! He can remove an enemy from the field of combat for a couple of seconds. And he gets bonus protections from this when he lands. Wow! This, on paper, sounds like some incredible support potential. It's not. Why? There are 3 very specific reasons I don't like Naja in the support role. 1, and most important, Flaming Spear does absolutely nothing in a support standpoint. Yes, he heals himself, which is nice. But unlike Guan Yu's heal, he's not healing his allies. He's not providing any kind of benefit to his allies. This is a crit strike chance self-heal. That isn't going to matter to a support Naja, because support Najas really aren't going to be building crit strike chance. All right, if they are, there is a problem, which goes without saying. Universe Ring Toss is really effective as a support ability. That we can all agree on that. Armillary Sash has got two problems. One is that this is extremely easy to miss. Okay? You need to be very practiced with Naja and have at least some experience with the game to pull this off consistently. And if I haven't played Naja in a recent enough time, I can't hit diddly squat with this, okay? I have to have at least had one minimum warm-up game with Naja to even have a shot at hitting this thing. That's not unique to me. There are a lot of people who have problems hitting this, and you can just play matches with Najas. You'll see what I mean. The second problem I have with this, besides the ease of which to miss this, is that this is surprisingly very long range. And in the Kepri episode, I talk about how you have to be very careful with abduct, because if you abduct the wrong target, or you abduct at the wrong time, or you abduct a little too deep into the enemy, you die before you can make any kind of serious contribution to your team. This is even more true of Armillary Sash. Alright? You sash a target at the wrong time before your team is ready, you're dead before your teammates can even save you. Alright? That sounds a little extreme from a support standpoint, but you have to realize there are quite a number of items that can really tear through supports very quickly if the enemy's building right. And honestly, a lot of enemies do. Okay? If you're not sashing the enemy hunter and your team isn't ready, you're dead. It's just that simple. That's literally all that's there. Okay? This is very high risk as a support ability. It can be incredibly devastatingly effective from a support standpoint. I'm not going to argue that. It can be amazing. It can also get you killed very, very quickly. Alright, my biggest gripe, though, with Naja is, in fact, Windfire Wheels. The star of the show here. The issue is let's compare this to Kumbhakarna's ult really quick. Kumbhakarna's ult pops an enemy up for slightly less time, but he doesn't go with them. Basically, when Kumbhakarna ults a target, for the next 5 or so seconds, it's a 4v5, assuming standard team fight starts where it's 5-on-5, right? So Kumbhakarna, for the next 5 seconds, makes it a 5v4. That's quite a substantial benefit, especially since Kumbhakarna has his root, he's got his sleep afterwards. Great. But Naja goes with the target when he uses Windfire Wheels. This doesn't make it a 5v4. For the next, 7 seconds, your team is without their support, and the enemy team is without one of their whatever. It depends on who you hit. But they probably have their support, because most likely you're not targeting the enemy support with Windfire Wheels, you're targeting someone a little bit more dangerous in terms of damage output. So the enemy team has their support still down on the ground, setting up kills for the rest of their team, and you're not there to counter that. I have seen more allies die while their Naja is up in the air ulting someone, because Naja wasn't there to stop me from abducting his Kepri, or silencing someone as Ganesh, or whatever. Basically, when Naja uses this on an enemy as a support, he's basically sending an invitation to the enemy support, again, unless they're the target of the ult, but he's basically sending an open invitation to the enemy support, hey, grab whoever you want. Set up for a nice 5v4 when I land, because one of my allies is probably going to be dead by the time I land again. That's my big problem with Naja as a support. This pulls Naja himself out, and a lot of the time, your team can't afford to lose you because you're the support. Okay? That's my problem with Naja support. That was a long tangent for that. We're going to go into a much smaller tangent for Serket, because this one is much more visible. This represents literally half of her crowd control. Cobra's Kiss. They they have the Cobra's Kiss poison drives them to madness. Yes, potentially useful. There's a problem with this though. This is the same problem I have with Bacchus's ult actually, and why I don't use Bacchus as a support very often. Unless I'm specifically looking for damage, but that's a conversation we'll have during the Bacchus episode. The problem with Cobra's Kiss here, as a support ability, is that the Cobra's Kiss poison, driving gods to madness, is not predictable. When you're a support, you ideally want to be setting up kills for your allies. That's part of your role. Cobra's Kiss makes this more difficult for you, even as a support, because you have no idea if they're going to just walk towards Circuit, if they're going to attack the nearest ally of theirs, if they're just going to, you have no idea what they're going to do while under the influence of this poison. And neither do your allies. I have been both an ADC with a Circuit support, or I've been the enemy support and been victim to this. I use the term victim loosely here, where somebody has missed abilities or shots because they made the wrong guess on what this was going to do. Alright? As a support ability, this is not as effective as you think it would be. My second problem, Last Breath. A lot of people use this as a glorified root, basically. Sounds great. Two problems. One, it's an ult. You're waiting 90 seconds for a root, basically. It says stun here, which is technically true, but you're waiting 90 seconds for a stun that also prevents you, a support, from doing anything else during that. Okay? Think about that for a bit. You are standing in place as an assassin, yes, building protection items, but as an assassin with a lower baseline protections, trying to stun this target in place. So your only hard crowd control is on your ult, and it fixes you in a single position. Now let's compare this to, say, Ganesh. Because that's one of the first things you're probably thinking, well, Professor, Ganesh, when he does his dash and he hits a target, he pops them up. And it takes him it takes him a second or two to do that. He's standing still during that. Yeah, he is. Yes, he is. The difference here is that Ganesh is a guardian. He has higher baseline protections. 1. 2, the rest of his abilities do support things. Increases the enemy's damage. Silence the enemy. Alright? He's not restricted to this pop-up as his primary form of crowd control, or even supporting activity. A third, it combos really well with his ult. You can pop someone up right on one of those lines and just devastate their lives. The Circuit has no option for this. Nothing even comparable. Why would you use Circuit when Ganesh is just better in literally every regard here? Unless you're, again, really secretly trying to do damage and you didn't want to be a support in the first place, but that's a conversation we'll have for another episode. I've already ranted about several things. But that's why I don't typically bring Naja or Circuit into the support role, despite the fact that you see them quite often in that role. I don't like Fenrir either, for the same reason. His only real hard crowd control is Ragnarok. He does have a conditional stun on Unchained. It can take a little while to kind of actually work this up to where it matters, but his other two abilities, from a support standpoint, mean basically nothing. Yes, he gets increased protections from Brutalize. Yay, verily. But it's not reducing their protections like Guan Yu's Total Assault. It's not slowing them. Nothing like that. Alright? And even then, you're not really getting that much in the way of protections. You're getting, what, I think 13 protections? 12.5? Let me see. This goes for 5 ranks. 7.5, 12.5. 12.5 protections. It's not a lot of protections. Unless I'm miscalculating this and it's actually 1.5 per your actual level, which would be a bit more substantial, but I'm not really sure. But even then, that's still only going to be 35 protections, which is okay, but for a 4-second ability that's forcing you to follow the enemy, that can be very dangerous for completely different unrelated reasons, because at the very least, when Khepri abducts somebody, which is the equivalent of this basically, not only are you getting increased protections, but you're silencing them. with Brutalize, you're just boosting your protections and you're damaging them. Also, you'll notice that a lot of his abilities have really nice scaling. I mean, at full runes, each strike gains 15% additional scaling, right? Ragnarok, as nice as this is for carrying enemies off, it's 120% scaling there. That's pretty substantial. Just building him support makes him lose so much damage, it's ridiculous. Finally, to address the last thing, the interesting story of Ratatoskir's supports. This one's a little interesting because there actually is... He makes for a decent... Actually, he makes for a surprisingly more effective support. The problem is that it takes him a little too long to get into the role, so to speak, because he does have to build up his Acorn. And his Acorn, which we'll talk about when I eventually get... that's not... When we eventually get into the squirrel... The squirrel and solo lane. Why is this not showing up here? Okay, that's weird. You can see where these are increasing your protections or your max health by a percentage, right? Which is nice. Okay. But because it's increasing these by a percentage, they don't really make that much of an impact in the early game. So, in a strange twist, Ratatoskir is a really good late game support, but he kind of suffers in the early game, which is not ideal. He can be good in the role, but you really have to adjust, and it's a complete mental shift. I might one day do a Ratatoskir support video, but that's gonna... It's a weird conversation to have, but let's get back to support Ratatoskir. I typically go with the thick bark acorn when I support with Ratatoskir for a number of reasons. First off, I prefer to build protections over health, because if you're up against Kwang, Achilles, Thanatos, basically anyone who can either damage you based on a percentage of your health, or otherwise does damage when you fall below a certain threshold of health, or kills you at that point, having a little bit more max HP really doesn't make that big of a difference. Secondly, Thick Bark Acorn not only gives you 10% increased protections, which can really help you in various ways, but, I mean, a Glad Shield on a Thick Bark Acorn rat is amazing, but it also gives Flurry increasing protections. Now, we're going to go and look back at the abilities here. Consider for a hot minute. Dart. We have a slow on this. 14-second cooldown makes it a little long, but again, Dart's cooldown is reduced by 1 second for each enemy god hit by Flurry or Acorn Blast, so we have a kind of Guan Yu type thing going on here, which you've just seen how effective that can be. And we have Flurry, reduces enemy protections. Now, it's only physical protections, so it's not as effective as Tylo Assault is, but it's roughly equivalent. This does make Rat a little bit more geared towards physical heavy allied comps, which is a bit of a conversation to have, but nevertheless. And then we have a Stun on Acorn Blast. Alright, and then finally, even his ult has a pop-up on it. Rat can actually make, in a strange twist of fate, a really effective late-game support, but you have to get there, and that's the hard part. Like I said, one day I'll do an episode on this, because it's really odd. But I do recommend not trying to support Ratatoskir until you're really comfortable with the support role. This is really advanced supporting, and it's very difficult to pull off because it is so different from what most support gameplay is. Because you really can't stick your neck out in the early game as a support Ratatoskir like you normally would with literally almost any other support character. And then in the late game, you can stick your neck out as far as you want, because at that point, you're basically invincible. It's really weird. It's a very sudden mood whiplash. One day you'll see it. But that's all I'm really going to talk about for today. So with that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.